Welcome back to Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. I am here in Jerusalem, in the beautiful JNS Media Hub. My colleague Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS, he is back in the United States, all the way around the world, outside of Philadelphia. Alex, it's great to see you, especially after the very successful first annual, and I say that on purpose, first annual JNS International Policy Summit, already anticipating next year's event. What a great success it was, Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. We're really blown away with the success at the summit, to have the Prime Minister speak there for about 50 minutes, and the first speech by Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, Ron Dermer, Fox's Life, Liberty, and Levin's Mark Levin, Bruce Pearl, AP 2025 NCAA Coach of the Year, was there. Sid Rosenberg from WABC Radio and New York City morning show host, and 120 other speakers. 2 packed days filled with content, dealing with security issues, dealing with anti-Semitism, and trying to just chart a new policy course for the Jewish people and the state of Israel. We did it at the Waldorf Astoria. And it was just, again, it was an unbelievable success, over 700 people. And, even until now, just right before, I'm still getting messages, people saying that it was a historic event, people saying it was one of the best conferences they'd ever been to. And I think that part of it was just creating a sense of belonging among all the people that attended and watched online. They felt like, our side has a story to tell, and nobody's told it like this. And they were very, very happy to be a part of that.
We're going to get to some of the specifics in terms of what Prime Minister Netanyahu said just in a few minutes, and some of the other speakers. But top story, and you were a part of this actually, as you were making your way to your flight at Ben-Gurion International Airport yesterday, a Houthi fired ballistic missile slammed into an open area within the confines of the airport yesterday. I saw images today showing a huge crater in the ground. Several people were injured. Thank God nobody seriously. But from what I understand, it was an isolated malfunction of the interception system. Israel has, in fact, taken down about 96% of the missiles fired by the Houthis. This one got through. Now you have flights being canceled. Some of the international airlines are canceling their flights. But give us a play-by-play. You were actually there at the airport, from what I understand, and had to seek shelter as the missile was making impact there.
Yeah, I was at the airport this yesterday morning, and it taken me about 35 minutes to get through the security at the airport. I don't know what was going on there. It was a big delay, and I was literally just closing up my suitcase and putting my belongings back into my pocket when the sirens went off. They were telling everybody to go back out into the ticketing hall. And I thought to myself, if I go to the ticketing hall, I'm going to have to come back through the security. And I don't want to do that because I just spent 35 minutes on that line. So I started to make my way in towards the passport control. I was walking quickly, but not running, thinking to myself that the airport is the most protected site in Israel in terms of missile defense. So there's got to be all kind of Iron Dome and Arrow and other batteries around the airport. So I was just really walking pretty calmly, and I get to the middle of this room, which was at that time completely empty, where people could enter their passports. And I'm standing in the middle of this large room by myself, and all of a sudden a huge explosion. I mean, the entire building shook. I found myself quickly just on one knee, instinctively covering my head. And we are a major blast, and the impact took place just a few hundred yards from where I was standing in an orange grove, which was just outside of the access road leading to Terminal 3. And we saw images of dirt and shrapnel that had made it all the way up to the area where passengers load and unload going in and out of the terminal. And in fact, we saw that there were 7 people injured, one moderately, several people what they call light injuries. But if you've seen the size of some of the shrapnel pieces, anywhere from several inches to even as much as 2 or 3 feet large, I mean, this is it was a major, major miracle that nobody was killed at the airport yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely crazy that you were actually there and saw that in person. Prime Minister Netanyahu pointing directly at Iran, vowing that there would be a forceful response following yesterday's ballistic missile attack.
Yeah, and Netanyahu shared a tweet from Donald Trump that he posted, I think, in March, around the time where the United States decided that it was going to be launching military operations against the Houthis in Yemen, and the United States has been conducting a significant airstrike campaign inside of Yemen, going at strategic sites there, Houthi sites and leadership. But this message that Netanyahu shared was basically stating that the Houthis would have to pay. But in addition to that, that all attacks by the Houthis, that the United States would hold Iran responsible as the principal sponsor, financier, and organizer of terror, that stating that Iran is they say that they don't have control over their terror proxies and what they do, but rather the opposite, that they have complete and total control. And Israel stating that they are going to respond. There was a cabinet meeting. They said they will respond forcefully at the time and the place of their choosing.
So turning back to Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments at the summit last week, and you could probably break it down. You were right there. He focused a lot on Iran, emphasizing that Israel must, or the world really, must eliminate all of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. He also said Israel would only accept a nuclear agreement with Iran that completely dismantles Tehran's uranium enrichment capabilities.
They enrich uranium for one reason and one reason only, and that's to make nuclear weapons, which they intend to use to destroy my country and threaten America. Once they have the weapons of delivery, ballistic missiles, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, they will threaten every city in the United States. That is a palpable danger to Israel and to the free world, and it must be prevented. The way to prevent it is to dismantle all the infrastructure of Iran's nuclear program. That is a deal we could live with.
If you want to add to the other things he said, feel free, but let's focus on Iran first. Also, I want to ask at the same time as the United States, and we'll talk about it more later, continues to negotiate on and off with Iran over the last several weeks, how do the Prime Minister's comments jive with the policy currently being implemented by the United States in terms of those negotiations?
Well, the United States is entered into negotiations, and there was this report in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago stating that Israel was coming forward with a plan to attack the nuclear sites in Iran, both with airstrikes and with commando forces. That plan was leaked to the press. We have indications that this may be a correct week, that Israel does have a plan on the table, as Israel should have a plan on the table. But we're seeing perhaps a little bit of a divergent strategy between Israel and the United States as far as Israel is concerned. Iran has already launched hundreds of ballistic missiles at Israel, the number one and the number two largest ballistic missile strikes in the history of warfare against an enemy nation. And all their terror proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, have launched endless strikes, killing over 1,000 people already inside Israel on October 7th, and since that time. And every red line has been crossed. And if you want to know what Iran would do if they got a nuclear weapon, all you have to do is look at what they've done before they have deliverable nuclear weapons. So as far as Israel is concerned, they have every reason already to go in and to make sure that Iran never crosses the nuclear threshold by attacking the nuclear facilities. President Trump is seemingly, and not seemingly, I mean, he's entered into negotiations, but seemingly on the path of previous presidents that like Obama and Biden, that wanted to reach a nuclear deal with Iran. But I think it's important to remember here that Trump is the one who pulled out of the JCPOA, the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. And what the Trump is doing right now is he's basically giving Iran a last chance, a ladder to come down from their path toward escalation, to demonstrate to the world that he is not a warmonger, but wants to be a peacemaker. And he's giving Iran the opportunity to let U.S. inspectors come in and to peacefully dismantle the nuclear weapons program. Now, it's a dangerous gambit. Even if Iran would sign a deal, would they live up to their ends of the bargain? Would they give all of the nuclear sites over to inspectors and allow the dismantlement of the complete nuclear program? But I think that we're getting a sense from some of the rhetoric that's coming out of the Iranian side about Trump. There was one of the negotiators, I believe, called Trump a complete fool this past week, and just really bad mouthing the United States and what they're trying to do. And we understand that Trump is a man that has, on the one hand, a big ego, on the other hand, doesn't have a tremendous amount of endless patience. And so I think that this approach to demonstrate to the world that he's giving Iran this pathway down, when these talks break down, and I think we have every reason to believe that these talks will break down, you're going to see a military threat on the backside of these negotiations. Israel can strike. There's the potential that the United States will participate in a strike. I believe that we are on the runway toward a military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. I'm not a prophet, but I believe that that could happen in anywhere from the next 2 to 4 months.
Alex, the Prime Minister at the summit last week also touched on other issues in the Middle East, including the situation in Lebanon. He's mentioned the Houthis as well, and also said that a so-called Palestinian state is, quote, a folly, nothing more than a folly. Is there anything else you want to highlight from any of the Prime Minister's remarks?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's important to note the policy aspects, like we're talking about with Iran, that Israel is, completely opposed to allowing Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, and will do whatever they need to do in order to prevent that. Also, that Israel is not going to cave into international pressure from France, from the United Nations, from others to give in to a Palestinian state, that a Palestinian state would be the ultimate reward for the horrific massacre of October 7th, and that it simply cannot happen. And I do believe that you're seeing the Prime Minister, who back in 2009 sort of paved the pathway toward a Palestinian state with his remarks, is now formally walking them back and stating that there will be no Palestinian state. There cannot be a Palestinian state. But what was perhaps most interesting about the Prime Minister's remarks was how much detail he went into with regard to the operation to explode the beepers against the thousands of Hezbollah operatives. And I really urge anybody that has not listened to the Prime Minister's speech at the JNS Summit, you will be completely fascinated to learn about the timing and the considerations that went into deciding when and how to pull the trigger on that unbelievable operation. And then similarly, the details that went in to the decision to take out Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, while he was en route to the United Nations to deliver a speech there, really giving away a lot of information that previously had not been reported in the media. The Prime Minister basically gave us about 50 minutes of his time, going way over schedule, but it was an indication of how friendly he felt the audience was, and also I think a deep amount of respect for the work that JNS has been doing over the last several years to provide legitimacy to the government's actions, particularly since October 7th.
Pretty amazing, those never before revealed details revealed at the JNS Summit. At the same time, you had the privilege of interviewing former ambassador, current government minister Ron Dermer, who talked about the importance in Gaza of both elements in terms of the hostages, ensuring that the hostages are released, and at the same time, finishing off Hamas, making sure that Hamas is no longer a threat to the state of Israel. So talk a little bit about the comments that Minister Ron Dermer made to you directly.
Yeah, I think, again, this is also something that people should watch. Certainly the Prime Minister and Minister Dermer were among two of the major top highlights of the summit. But we're starting to see now that Israel is prepared, with the complete backing of the Trump administration, to launch another major operation into the Gaza Strip. We saw just yesterday that the cabinet has approved the launch of a major operation that actually calls for the long-term military occupation of the Gaza Strip, recognizing that the IDF is not going to pull out, that there has not been any other plausible option for the governance and administration of the Gaza Strip other than the IDF. And this is what's going to take place. I do believe and I understand that with President Trump coming to the region just in about 10 days from now, he'll be going to Saudi Arabia and other countries, not scheduled to come to Israel, by the way. Pete Hegseth, on the other hand, the Secretary of Defense, is planning on coming to Israel ahead of the meeting with President Trump in Saudi Arabia. That Israel doesn't really want to launch the full-scale operation ahead of the president's visit, doesn't want to create any kind of like dual optic for the president, to give him the opportunity to come with a message of peace and not to see split screens where Israel is attacking inside Gaza. But at this point, after the president's visit, I think that you can expect that there's going to be a massive call up. We've already started to see troops being called up. You might see several battalions, tens of thousands, probably over 50,000 soldiers that will enter into the Gaza Strip in the coming weeks to take complete control of the Strip, to eradicate Hamas, both as a political power and a military force. We've seen how Hamas has reorganized their ranks in the period after the initial major operation and the creation of the ceasefire, and also then creating the conditions in which you might see a desperate negotiation on Hamas's behalf to push for an immediate and cessation of violence in Gaza with the release of all of the hostages. I know this government cares deeply about the hostages. They're feeling if they can get back, of the 22, 24 living hostages, even half of them, they would do that. And they've delayed the war until this point with attempts to get them back. But there is a feeling now inside the Israeli government that any kind of deal right now is not being seriously presented by Hamas. And the only way to deal with this now is to launch a massive military operation.
So just to hit more on that news item, last night, Israel's Security Cabinet voted unanimously to expand the country's military operation against the Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza. So that's what you referred to. That's what we're seeing now. But before we turn away from the summit, I just want to focus on Ambassador Huckabee's comments. You mentioned this was his first public speech since he became officially the ambassador. He touched on the issue of the hostages, saying that was a main focus of the United States. I understand he was asked also about would the Trump administration agree to sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. He said that that announcement would not be made in the near future because the administration is really focused on the hostage situation and getting back the hostages.
People ask me, what's your primary objective being here? Well, the first thing is let's get the hostages home, and let's get them home now, every last one of them.
Well, I think you have to get through the war first. I mean, that's so important. We have to figure out what will be the solution the day after in the Gaza Strip. And you can't have the day after while you're still fighting. The fight is not finished. You're going to see that the war is going to pick itself up in a big way. We also have to see what happens to the residents of Gaza. As far as the information that I'm getting from people that have been in the room, the Trump administration is urging Israel to go in and to take over all of Gaza, to try to figure out the logistics to move the residents outside of the Gaza Strip, to take full control over the Gaza Strip. And so you're not going to see any movement with regard to Judea and Samaria before the situation in Gaza is finished and before you see a stabilization of the wider regional war, which may move the theater all the way to Iran. So, I think once all those things are done, and that's a lot, if we go back to Minister Dermer's remarks, I asked him, where does he think that Israel is going to be in 12 months? And he said he thinks the war will be over and that we will have signed or at least be on the pathway to additional peace agreements, normalization agreements with other Muslim majority countries. So I think if you get to that, then you might see the United States take a position on Judea and Samaria. But one of the things that was most interesting about what the ambassador said, he said, policy and the U.S. policy toward Israel starts with how allies treat one another. And that was an allusion to how previous presidents, including the Biden administration and the Obama administration, had treated Israel. And he's basically saying, we are the friends of the state of Israel. This administration is the friend of Israel. And policy starts with how we treat our friends. So a commitment to do that. I think one of the lighter moments, he said that he told the story of how the Jewish community was saying to President Trump, you need to send a Maccabee to Israel, and Trump heard it wrong, and instead he sent a Huckabee. Anybody that's met the ambassador, and I've already had the privilege of interacting with the ambassador on multiple occasions in the 2 to 3 weeks that he's been on the ground in Israel, just an unbelievable, sincere friend of the state of Israel. And we're very, very fortunate to have him. We were very fortunate to have him at the summit for what was really his first policy speech in the state of Israel.
Alex, if we can, let's turn our attention to the north right now, the situation in Syria. You have the current regime attacking the Druze and the Christian residents of that country. You have one Druze leader, spiritual leader, accusing the government of carrying out an unjustifiable genocidal campaign against the Druze. You have Israel intervening as well, carrying out airstrikes very close to the presidential palace in Damascus on behalf or in defense of the Druze community there. You have Israeli Druze here in this country who have been demonstrating also, encouraging Israel to please save their fellow Druze in Syria. What is the latest on the situation there on the ground in Syria?
Yeah, well, I would encourage, again, everybody to listen back to Minister Dermer's remarks at the summit, where he talks about the fall of Bashar Assad and how Turkey has been a belligerent backer of the HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, the organization that came in and basically deposed President Bashar Assad. And the Biden administration, took them off the terror list. They had previously had affiliations with Al Qaeda, basically looking at al-Shara, known as al-Jolani, as a moderate force in Syria, just because he changed his terrorist clothes and put on a suit like so many other terrorists across the Middle East that are trying to establish legitimacy with the West. But here you're seeing that this wasn't a liberation movement for Syria, that rather that this HTS is just coming in and they are attacking the Druze minority. And recall that there are thousands of Druze that live inside of Israel. They're relatives and friends living on the other side of the Syrian border. You have Kurds inside Syria that have an affinity toward Israel. And also you have these Christian communities which have been decimated across all of the Middle East, which are now being attacked by this Islamic fundamental group, HTS. So they're showing their true colors. Again, the Trump administration giving Israel the backing to do what they want to do in southern Syria, even urging as far as Israel to go ahead and take control over as much as the southern third of Syria. But of course, for Israel to do that, they would have to hold the territory. And so the question is, how many troops does Israel have to be able to do that? And is there a will within the country to have their soldiers, many of whom have been on reserve duty for more than 250 days out of the last 18 months, to be willing to now go on extended stays of service in order to secure southern Syria? But you do see how Israel is sticking up for its own Druze minority, which demonstrates how Israel is the only country in the region that actually protects religious minorities, including the Druze, including Christians, and is even trying to defend and deter HTS from coming in and committing these massacres against the Druze community in southern Syria.
Alex, let's turn to the situation now within the Trump administration, specifically this Washington Post report suggesting that President Trump was upset at U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz for his hardened stances, specifically actually when it comes to Iran. Reports here indicating perhaps Trump is going to nominate Waltz to be the ambassador to the UN. There's also another report that Waltz and Prime Minister Netanyahu were having negotiations or talks with each other, perhaps bypassing President Trump. Netanyahu denying that he had any sort of intensive contact with Mike Walls. What's the latest on this perhaps shakeup there within the ranks of the Trump administration?
Yeah, I think it's important that people don't necessarily believe straight up everything that they're reading in the mainstream media, particularly the accusations that Waltz was essentially fired because he had too much military coordination with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I can assure you that the Israeli and the American military establishments right now are working in very, very deep coordination with one another. I don't know if that's was from Waltz to Netanyahu or Waltz to Dermer, or whether that's Hegseth to Minister of Defense Yisrael Katz. We don't know exactly the semantics of who are the coordinating parties, but I can guarantee that there's a lot of coordination, and President Trump is encouraging this coordination. So the idea that Waltz is getting fired over coordination with Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think that that's not founded. Secondly, if you know anything about President Trump, if he's firing somebody, he's not going to reassign them to a senior post like as ambassador to United Nations, right? If he was tired of Waltz and he felt that he couldn't trust him, he would put somebody else that he felt was loyal to him into that position inside the United Nations. So, I do see that there's a bit of a realignment. Also, after pulling back the nomination of Elise Stefanik for reasons of wanting to maintain the Republican majority inside Congress, he needed somebody strong inside the United Nations. And we have every reason to believe that Mike Waltz is going to be an unbelievable ambassador for the United Nations. For the United States at the United Nations. We're also reading reports now that Stephen Miller is being considered as the top candidate to replace Mike Waltz at the head of the NSA. And Stephen Miller has a very, very pro-Israel stance and also anti-Iran stance, which also would give indication that the reason why Waltz was fired was not because of his push to take military action against Iran and for his coordination with Israel, because Stephen Miller is known by the Israeli community to be just as strong as Waltz on those issues. So hopefully, this realignment, the shakeup, is going to be good for Israel, getting a very pro-Israel advocate at the United Nations in Mike Waltz, hopefully getting a pro-Israel and anti-Iran advocate in the NSA, maybe in Stephen Miller, maybe in somebody else. We're waiting to hear who that candidate's going to be.
Alex, I don't know if you heard this news just here in the last hour or so. Another mysterious explosion taking place in Iran. This coming after a series of explosions taking place in that country. Several days ago, there was an explosion at a civilian port. And then you had another explosion here with a fire at a motorcycle factory. At least 3, 4, if not more, explosions taking place throughout the country of Iran. I don't know if anybody's taken responsibility at this point. I don't know if anybody's pointing any fingers. Is there anything that we know concrete about what's going on there in terms of these explosions?
People are being tight-lipped. We don't know where these attacks are originating. We don't understand the full depth of the strategic sites that were hit, for example, at a quote unquote motorcycle factory. What else is being produced at a motorcycle factory? We don't know if these are Israeli operations, if these are American operations, if these are dissident operations that might be backed by Israel, the United States. Israel's certainly not saying anything about it. And in the past, when Israel's not behind something, they're more likely to be forward about not being the ones who are behind it. When they are behind it, that's when they're the most quiet about it. So we are seeing that the theater of the military theater vis-a-vis Iran is shifting. And I think it's also an indication that you're going to see hostilities between Israel, the United States, and Iran pick up dramatically in the coming months, probably with the breakdown of the negotiations. But, Israel, the United States, dissidents, whoever's doing this, sending a signal to Iran that they know where all the facilities are. They have boots on the ground. They, are undermining the integrity of this regime. And I think it's really important, and we've stressed this on the show many times, that the idea of taking out the military facilities inside Iran is absolutely critical. But what is even more critical is returning Iran, the government of Iran, back to its people that are not Islamic fundamentalists, people that are not uh, don't have regional ambitions and a desire to fund terror organizations with billions of dollars all around the region, rather a regime that will take whatever money that it has into rebuilding infrastructure, rebuilding the economy, which is in tatters inside Iran. And the way that you convince the people of Iran that they have the opportunity to overthrow the regime with the revolutionary spirit that runs deep in their society is to demonstrate weakness and cracks in the strength of this regime. And certainly attacks like this really undermine, as I said, the integrity of the regime in Iran. And so it is important both to strike at the nuclear facilities, also to take out the regime ultimately, and really to leave that to the hands of the Iranians, and then to give the Iranians the opportunity to install a new government that will then focus on the rebuilding of Iran's economy and infrastructure, so that Israel, the United States are not involved in nation building inside Iran. Leave that to the Iranian people, but give them the pathway toward a regime change. And strikes like this are very, very important in demonstrating that it is possible to see a change in the head of the Iranian terror machine.
Alex, this past week, as Israel was commemorating its Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron, and then going to Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut, unfortunately, the celebrations on Yom HaAtzmaut were subdued this year as a result of the many wildfires, if you want to call them that, which perhaps were arson events carried out by Arabs. There were some arrests which have been made. And nobody's saying officially that these were arson attacks, but essentially the country of Israel this past Wednesday and Thursday was on fire. You're talking about 6,000 acres of forest burned, 40,000 Israeli residents evacuated on the holidays, 45 individuals, including 17 firefighters who were injured, needing medical treatment for smoke inhalation and other related injuries. So this, in my view, again, it's all speculation at this point, but there were some arrests. This was a massive, massive, major event here. And again, perhaps arson carried out by Arabs, a lot of them potentially Israeli citizens who, took the opportunity as Israel was commemorating all those who were lost in wars and all those who were killed, murdered in terrorist attacks, in order to go out. And we saw the incitement on social media carried out by some of these elements to essentially try to burn the country down on one of our most important days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw really strange statements from the president of Israel on the morning of the I think it was on Memorial Day, stating that, these fires are a result of climate change. I mean, Israel has been an arid, dry society, nation for centuries. Okay. It was about 80 degrees outside Jerusalem on the day when the fires were sparked. It's certainly a warm day, but not some crazy hot day. And, you have 6 months of summer where there's no rain in Israel, for as long as in time memorial. So the idea that all of a sudden the climate is changing and that's the reason why you're having fires, it's absurd. We've seen incitement over the years, many indications that the Arabs are using fires as a form of ecological terrorism. I mean, even if you remember just the Gaza Strip in the years leading up to October 7th, they were sending incendiary balloons and kites that the whole point of them was to be sent across the border, and then to be essentially dropping Molotov cocktails in farms and in open areas to create wildfires. And as you mentioned, the prime minister said that there were 18 arrests. Now, the Israeli police came and said, interesting that the prime minister said 18. We only know about 3 arrests. But I don't know why the prime minister would say that there were 18 arrests if there weren't. One of the arrests that was made was a resident of Tuba in southern Jerusalem who was arrested in the act of setting fire to forest in southern Jerusalem area. And we've seen videos of olive trees being burnt from the middle in Park Canada, which is one of the forests that got hit hardest of any, where we saw videos where just random trees were on fire while the other ones weren't. And there's no way that olive trees are going to catch fire from the roots unless they're being set on fire. And we saw a lot of incitement on social media from the Arab communities calling for individuals to be setting fire. So the idea that this only just happened because of cigarettes and barbecues gone awry, I think it's absurd to believe that. And then you have to ask about the timing. The idea that this happened on Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut. Basically, when you have such a large fire, what that means is that all of the fire services, and we saw not only the local fire services, but even the military and even other countries had to lend assistance, including Cyprus and Spain and Italy and other countries to help put out these fires. Now, on Yom HaAtzmaut, you have fireworks celebrations taking place all over the country. And obviously, if you're going to have fireworks celebrations taking place, what do you need to have on hand? You need to have firefighters on hand just in case something happens. It's just like normal safety preventative measures that you have to take at these ceremonies. And so when you had all of the country's fire infrastructure diverted to putting out these forest fires, what happened is that basically every fireworks ceremony across the country was canceled. In fact, the annual torch lighting ceremony on Independence Day was canceled at Har Herzl Military Cemetery. So that was canceled. And then also the National Air Show, which takes place every year across the country, which is an incredible event, for adults and children that go out into major cities and they see these incredible flyovers by F-16s, F-35s. All of it was canceled. So Arabs were able to, by setting these wildfires, and we don't have 100% conclusive proof. Nobody's saying conclusively that it was arson, even though we have every indication to believe that it was. They essentially were able to mute and silence these celebrations of Israel's 77th birthday.
Yeah, just a terrible way to go into Independence Day. And somehow, by the way, Alex, there were very little, if not basically no fires in Judea and Samaria near the Arab villages and towns. So I don't think that's coincidence that none of those areas suffered any, climate-related burning, but areas like Modi'in in the center of the country off Route 1 connecting Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, somehow those forests burned.
Josh, I think it's an embarrassment that the president of Israel stated that this is a part of climate change. I mean, what kind of a deep state globalist do you have to be citing climate change when you see the incitement on social media for Arabs to be lighting fires in our forests? This isn't a new phenomenon. We've been dealing with the lighting of fires, ecological terrorism in Israel now for years. And also, it's an indication of, who loves the land. Israel is the only nation in the Western world that has more trees at the end of the 20th century than they had at the beginning of it. Israel plants trees. They develop farms. If you remember what happened when Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005, you had these unbelievable greenhouses, which were taking this dry sand, desert sand, and turning it into just this incubator for this incredible hydroponic lettuce and lettuce that was grown in the sand that's now exported around the world. What did the Arabs do when they got those greenhouses? They destroyed them. Okay. The Arabs say that the land belongs to them, yet they set fire to it. They try to destroy it. And you have the president of Israel saying that it's the result of climate change. You have generals in the Israeli military who have said in recent years that the number one threat to the security of Israel is climate change. Okay, where are they getting those messages? They're getting it from the United Nations that's pushing this whole climate change narrative. But in Israel, it's important to think about the environment. It's important to reduce pollution, both on land, in sea, and in the air, and make Israel one of the cleanest and most ecologically friendly countries in the world. I support that 100%. But to say that your biggest threats of national security are climate change, to say that the arson terrorism is being caused by climate change. I mean, it's just a mass distraction. And it's really an embarrassment, I think.
I agree to that, Alex. We're nearly out of time. I just have one last question, very, very important question at that. What are the dates of the second annual JNS International Policy Summit 2026? Have you already locked down those dates for next year?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I don't have the calendar right in front of me, but we specifically did the first inaugural JNS International Policy Summit just days after Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel, and with the March of the Living in Poland, and just in the days leading up to Yom HaZikaron, Israeli Memorial Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. And we fully intend to host the second JNS International Policy Summit at the same period. I need to check the calendar as to what those days are. Stay tuned. But we're also now getting into discussions about doing the first JNS Policy Summit in Washington, D.C. I hope that we might be able to do that in the fall or early in 2026. So stay tuned. We want to build off of the success and the momentum of this incredible summit, and to make sure that this becomes an annual event, both in Israel and to have its counterpart in the United States.
It certainly was a great event. Looking forward to that Washington summit and already next year's JNS International Summit. Alex, have a great trip over there, and looking forward to seeing you back in Jerusalem very, very soon.
Josh, thanks so much.
I want to give a shout out to the people behind the cameras here at the JNS Media Hub in Jerusalem: Ryan Lifshitz, Zach Sickerman, Yuri Svertsky, and Esther Eden, and everyone else on the production team. Make sure you check out all the great content on JNS TV, on YouTube. Also go to jns.org for all the latest breaking news from Israel, the Middle East, and the entire Jewish world. My name is Josh Hasten here in Jerusalem. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Jerusalem Minute.